So I'm Josh, and I am a grateful parent in recovery, I think. So I didn't really prepare for this because I don't think I should prepare for something like talking about my life. I wasn't prepared for living it, so what the hell. It all started at a women's hospital in Vegas. My mom was basically a single mother at that time. My biological father kicked rocks because of his addiction and came to Oregon. My mom had some trouble raising me to begin with, and she put me with my grandmother, who, to me, she's like the all-around parent for me. She's the one who's been my anchor to what is something of a normal life. But so for the first 3 years of my life, I'm with my grandmother. My mother had met this gentleman who adopted me, but they adopted me in this way that one weekend I went over from my grandmother's to visit my mom after not seeing her for so long, and she just kept me from my grandmother. And I guess during that time in Vegas, if you have no contact with the other parent's family at all for like 2 years and you post it in the newspaper or something, you can be adopted legally without the other parent's consent. And so that's what they're going for. Now, thankfully this guy was actually a genuinely awesome character. He was in the Air Force. He was a Black Knight. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's like the Navy SEALs of the Air Force. He was helping develop the B-2 stealth bomber, which is that really cool plane that looks like a triangle. He was a lieutenant, and he was a firefighter as well. One of the only pictures I have of him is him saving somebody's life during a fire. And I don't know who's taking a picture during that kind of crap, but I guess somebody did. But either way, this gentleman, he would take me out on, he taught me how to rappel. He taught me how to rock climb in some of the most beautiful scenic areas that you can really imagine, like Red Rock. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's awesome. One of the best memories in my happy place is being tied into the side of this cliff and watching the scope of all the stars you can possibly see. Those of you who are from Oregon only, stars are the things up in the sky that are bright and not planes. Because I know there's a lot of overcast here. So things were good for a while. Around when I was 8 years old, my mom divorced him, and he was already very manic depressed because his life was like two lives. He worked for a ex-military top secret contractor called EGG Special Projects, and so he'd be gone for 5 days and come back for 5 days, and four and three. So living this like double life in a sense, I could only assume could cause so much depression, So when she divorced him, I mean, he was madly in love with my mother. He adopted me. He had two girls, my younger sisters, with her. And so he was distraught. So this is when it started to begin, like I had to grow up really quick. A lot of the nights that I spent when they separated and we were in joint custody going back and forth, he'd be crying at night. I would stay up because of this, because my sisters who were in diapers still, they'd be crying and he'd be crying, and I'd just go back and forth, just consoling them and trying to basically take away the hurt. My ninth year birthday cake, he's crying into it, literally tears into that cake, and talking about how much he loved my mother and things like that. And that was July 29th. 97. August 11th, he was supposed to take me rappelling for a makeup birthday present, basically. I was waiting at the window like every kid does for his like Hallmark picture perfect dad to come, and after about a few hours, my mom threw us in the car and drove us to his house, and I got out pretty quick. I saw that his Jeep Wrangler had battery cables attached to it, so the battery probably died. I ran inside before my mom, and I whipped into his room, and there he had taken his life. my mom scooped me up like pretty quick after that, and brought me away from that traumatic moment. But forever, that changed me on the inside, because that gave me a realization of the best things in your life sometimes don't last. I blamed myself for a long time because I felt like I could have spoken up, but at 9 years old, I mean, who the hell knows how to do something like that, you know? Take the pressure off of somebody's hurt and sorrow when you can't even comprehend it. So my counselor for school lived across the street from him, and they threw me back in school 3 days later, which was, in my retrospect, that was shitty of them. I went and saw my counselor, and the first things out of her mouth was, "He's a stupid man for taking his life," and I just gave her the finger. I knew what that was at 9, and walked out, right? Then I had a teacher who, I'm depressed. I have my head down, I'm grieving, and my teacher came through. His name, I'll never forget his name, Mr. Shook, slammed his fist down on my desk and was like, telling me to get over it, basically, and actually ripped me out of the classroom because I guess it was a disturbance or something like that. But my mom made me call everybody and tell them what happened and all this stuff. It was just really, really just a traumatic experience in my life. And the trauma even continued later on in my life, but we'll get to that. So I went from 5th grade, I was in DARE. This is my first experience with drugs, but I wasn't doing them. A kid brought St. John's wort to school, and I was like, "DARE, no," threw it away. But what happened was the dean of discipline brought me into his office and asked me about this kid and what he brought to school and if he gave it to anyone else and why didn't I tell somebody, and actually whipped out a baggie of cocaine. I didn't even know how to spell cocaine at that age, let alone knew what it was. And I told him I didn't know what it was. But here, after this incident, luckily my mom was dating the sheriff of the town. I was living in Pahrump, Nevada, next to Vegas. And he brought me in front of the school district board or whatever it is. My mom's boyfriend, who was supposed to be the officer there, was there. And this dean of discipline said that I was in possession and had turned it over and admitted to having this bag of cocaine when I really didn't. Well, it's not a really good thing to, in front of the whole school board, try to cross across the table to attack this guy because he was lying about you. So I got picked up by my neck and my pants and set outside while he discussed me, and I got expelled. That was the first expulsion. So I went to 6th grade after I moved in with my mom's sister because I was a problem child. Second day of school year, walked out of the cafeteria, saw a bully bullying some kid, and I basically beat him up and broke his arm in front of pretty much the whole entire school population because it was right there in front of the cafeteria while we were all eating lunch. And here I am again in front of the principal there, and they're telling me that I cannot go to any school in Vegas because the fight was so popular that I would be challenged by other bullies. And I was like, all right, bring it on. Not the right thing to say at that time. So this whole thing about meeting my biological father, this is a time in my life where I started turning things around. My grades were reflecting my feelings and emotions because I was trying to get over my adopted father's passing. I had this new, biological father who was trying to be a part of my life. But when you have a death of a parent, you get survivor's benefits from Social Security. And my biological father didn't know about this completely. His wife found out about it and switched it over. As soon as she did, my mom was like, "Oh, hell no," and snatched me back. And this is when I first ended up in Salem. I was kind of pissed about that. I went to 7th grade here, 8th grade, 7th at Whitaker, 8th at Claggett. And when I was in 8th grade, or actually I went also partially in 9th grade, there was a guy in Kaiser who used to go around getting donations for the library. If you waved at him, he would take his time to come across the street in his electric wheelchair, and wave at you back, and talk to you for a moment. Well, my mom ended up hitting this guy with her vehicle, which was a very big thing to her. And she was going to flee back to Vegas because she was just too embarrassed. And so I was like, no, I want to go live with my biological father again. She's like, fine. My biological father said, I don't need the money. I'm going to support him myself. And she said it's okay because he's only getting like $250 a month. So he was like, whatever, keep it. He was with a new wife at that time. She was pretty young. I think she was 1 year older than my 3? Oh, okay. Either way. But I spent a lot of time being that, to them, that problematic child. I was told I was a failure. I was told I was wrong. I was told all these things. I was yelled at constantly. I just spent pretty much from like 9 years old up into my early 20s just being yelled at, literally all the time. But during this time, I was about 15. My father had 2 companies, and he lost those companies. And so when we went to file for food stamps, they showed me having an income of just over $800, and they're like, "What the hell?" So my stepmom, my father, switched that over, and my mom immediately tried to snatch me back again. I managed to stay somehow, even through all that bullshit. Times where I would be called by her, and we'd argue back and forth. And so I never really got to express myself as a kid. I was always grounded because instead of helping me with my homework, they would yell at me because of my homework or my grades. And then I got expelled again because in 10th grade, right at the last 8 days of the school year, there was a friend of mine who had died in a drunk driving accident, and the morning announcements were on a TV, and they had set up this memorial for him. And my math teacher, who hated me because I slept during most of his class but passed it somehow, was like, if you want to watch it, go to the detention room. And I was like, all right, everybody, let's go. And more than half of the classroom got up with me, and we marched down there. Well, here I am being pulled into the principal's office again, and they're telling me, I congregated a classroom walkout. So instead of them suspending me, which is like a 7-day cutoff, it was 8 days, and they're like, go home, we're not even gonna call your parents. They did once I started walking down. So I spent my entire summer literally sitting in a room, couldn't lay down, couldn't sleep, couldn't do anything other than copy my math book and dwell on the hardships of being a teenager. And then I got to go to Job Corps, which was an awesome escape. I excelled there. I was in carpentry, I was in welding, and I just loved it. Once I left from there, I ended up coming back to Salem and living with my mother partially, and she went really bad into her addiction. At this time, I still wasn't even I tried weed once and maybe drank once, and I was moving from, I lived with my grandma partially. I went back and forth with her again. I moved from my grandmother's in with a gal that I had been dating at the time, and on the way, I was dropping off some of my adopted father's things that I kept with my mother, and when I walked in, the whole house was torn up. The couch was flipped, my sister's bed was flipped, and my mom was just on one for some reason. And so I didn't understand addiction at this time, and so I yelled at her. I didn't seek the help that she needed and to be pointed at. Instead, I helped get my sisters taken away by DHS. Luckily, during this entire time, my mother had kind of a best friend that lived down the road, and they lived down the road from us when we were in Vegas, and then they still live down the road from basically where my mom lives now. And my sisters went there. I helped my mom get my sisters back, just to have them taken away by DHS again a month after that. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the hell my mom's deal was, never realizing that she was just destroyed by a suicide, just like our family. And so my early 20s, my sisters, who were younger than me, a lot younger, were living at my mom's best friend's house. Their friendship ended, obviously, and we just basically swore off my mother and disowned her, and she went heavily into her alcoholism and usage. And I would spend so many times arguing with her, walking down the road with her as she's walking in the middle of the road, like middle of traffic and all that stuff, calling the police, and they say, you can't be arrested for being crazy. And just basically blaming myself because I couldn't fix my mother. You know, I cared about her. I'm the one who's known her so long. And so during this time, my first encounter with opiates happened. And this was because it was March 27th of 2007. I was working for Microsoft as a technical support specialist over the phone. You know, nothing's harder than telling people how to work their computer when you're over the phone and can't be there yourself. And I got into a car accident as a passenger, and I mean, it nearly killed me. I was a head-on collision. We were doing 80 miles an hour into somebody who was doing 45. And they basically, so they gave me Vicodin. I destroyed my whole right side of my 2 contusions. I woke up on the side of the road with them putting a gurney on, or neck brace on me. And so I didn't abuse my medication, but I didn't realize that there's things that happen when you take opiates and mix it with other things. Like I drank a little bit occasionally, and then also when you take things like Annex with opiates, you'll just fucking black out. So I would like come to a week later after the prescription ran out, and I would just be like, what the hell? Because people would be telling me that I did all this crazy stuff. The one thing I didn't mention is I have scoliosis, and I have super bad scoliosis. I try to work on my posture a lot, but I have more than 65-degree curvature as one of the 5 curvatures that I have in my spine. And this started coming on when I was 17. And so after I had a taste of the opiates that helped me through my car accident, having those outrageous, angry fights with my relatives and my grandmother, you know, who loves me dearly, and I would just get angry for no fucking reason. I started using my scoliosis as a means to get more opiates, and I got really hooked into them, but then I also knew how much money I could make off of them as well. And so I moved my grandmother's again, and I was on a pretty huge amount of oxycodone. I even got up to the point of fentanyl. I even got up to the point of chewing on fentanyl patches. I don't know if you've ever done that, but that shit is nuts, and I don't like it. I was actually on fentanyl plus, I think it was OxyContin or something like that, together. And my doctor finally, she just up and moved out of town, just gone, no referral, nothing like that. And what I was doing for a long time though, after the fentanyl with that doctor, was I was selling my script, like half of it, eating half of it, and then rebuying my original script from my dealer at like twice the price, like a dumbass. And I get a front on like triple the amount so I can pass my UA the next time, and I UA'd every month. So she up and left, and I actually went into, this is when I met Amber. It was like shortly after that, a little bit. I went to the methadone clinic, and they had just barely started me on Subutex. And then the doctor there was like, you're not an addict, you're in pain because of my scoliosis. I'm like, yeah, sure. And so she brought me to her private office, and I paid out of pocket for this. And same thing still happened. I would, eat, half my script and sell half of it, and then buy it back for so much more money. And so this went on for a while. Then one day, my doctor told me that there's this part of the UA that's called the 2D6 levels. It's the pain-killing part of your what your liver processes of the pill. And then there's the junk part, and the doctor showed me that the junk part of the pill I'm processing. I'm obviously taking my medication, but I'm not processing the pain-killing part, so it's useless. So they switched me to that Alpanas to bypass the liver. But as soon as I had those suckers, I self-medicated over the amount I was prescribed, and she just cut me off right then and there, and then put me back on Subutex for pain. And I was on the highest dose plus then some. I was on like 32 milligrams pill form, and then I was actually on the patches. I don't know if you know if there's buprenorphine patches, but there is. Basically, those weren't working after a while, and I just ended up getting off of those and going illicit. And I spent a long time driving as a taxi cab driver at night. Beginning of my shift would be paying for my cab. Second hour of my shift would be getting enough money to go and buy my opiates. And it just kept on rinse and repeat, just every day. I had a pretty big wake-up call when I nodded out behind the wheel and managed to hit a curb in between two vehicles in a cul-de-sac, and had that, oh shit, it's at night. Looked around got the hell out of there really quick. And it was funny because I didn't deal drugs out of my cab. I didn't use drugs in my cab. I just would, go and take my medication so I can drive for 12 to 17 hours. I did this every day, and it was really, really tiresome on me. My uncle worked with the cab company. I did too. He got me the job. He suspected that I was doing drugs in the cab, and my boss suspected, but my boss thought I was doing all sorts of shit, and I wasn't. And once that trailed off, I met the first person to ever give me heroin, and it was because I was tired of it. And he was like, "Well, you want to try some of this?" And so here I am over at the Bear Inn or whatever it is over there by Denny's, in the swimming pool bathroom for 3 hours, going somebody's got to use a bathroom. I'm sorry, just in there using it, smoking a bunch of heroin, and I was to the point where I was lying about it. I was avoiding confrontation about it. I mean, it was as easy as hopping in my taxi and driving away from any confrontation. As long as I was making money, nobody could say shit. As long as I was, appearing like I was successful, I didn't really care what anyone said. I eventually came to the conclusion that I had a problem, and I went to Cedar Hills Detox up in Portland. I had gone there 3 different attempts because I was trying to get into a program called Turning Point, which flew me all the way to Georgia, and I was in the southernmost part of Georgia with 70 other guys. And this is when I first figured out that if I rely on myself in a means of making myself feel good, I got that pain scale from 10 with my scoliosis all the way down to 0. I was lifting steel benches because I didn't have a fitness center there. I was doing whatever. I was doing dishes for the whole center. I mean, I was appearing to do everything that I thought people wanted me to do, but I wasn't doing it for myself. I came back, I was at Oxford. I had a bad experience with that in a sense because I'm sort of a loner. I don't really speak a lot. And I was working at the SOS Club for 6 months. And when I moved out of the Oxford house because I spent my rent money thinking that, I can float it on 1 month's worth of rent, they were like, nope, kicked me out. And it was not too long after that when I really, I relapsed. And I was just too ashamed to really continue sobriety. I just started into it again. And I ended up moving out to the house out in that's right behind the school that is over there off of Howe Prairie, right there at the gas station. And that's when I started actually using intravenous meth. And boy, did I fucking love it. It was something that I'm afraid of and I fear now so much because of how much I loved it. I used it, and I used it, and I used it under everyone's noses, so I thought. But, that whole thing, when you're on one, everybody can tell. They may not say something, but everyone can fucking tell. And I got spooked out of there because they busted the #1 most wanted in Marion County, the sheriffs. They took down this guy that was living in a tent that was across a little cul-de-sac there that was part of the ring of users that we had going on. They had our house under surveillance for 3 days. And I was like, oh shit, So moved into a couple houses that were not really healthy, and finally came to the point where I, like several months, or not several months, but a year ago, let's just say, I became homeless because of my choices. And everything that I do, even if it's not my choice, I try to do it to the fullest and the best of my ability because I feel like everyone's watching, and yeah. So I was really good at being homeless. I volunteered a lot. I mean, I appeared to look like an upstanding, not really productive member of society, but at least a member of something upstanding. I worked for the Homeless Outreach Advocacy Program. I worked for Northwest Bike Hub, all free, of course. I should have just gotten a job. But I saw how the one thing I didn't do was I wasn't selfish about my sobriety. I was selfless last time about my sobriety, and so I was doing it for everyone else, but I wasn't doing it for me. So when nobody else was there, like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna relapse. So this time I'm really selfish about it. So it came to the point now where when I had my worst moment was during this last Christmas. I found out I have problems with my heart due to my usage. I had a diagnosis, but I found out that I have, I didn't get away with it as much as I thought I could. So Christmas morning, I'm at the emergency room from an ambulance. Midday, when I'm being released, I call my uncle to give me a ride. He says, your mom's at the hospital. So I walk over to her room and I find out that she's dying from her addiction of alcoholism. Her liver's shut down and she's going to be going to hospice. And so I'm like, I'm trying to remain strong for her and my sisters because that's what I've always been. I've been their rock. My younger sister ended up pulling some of that weird shit she does where she was just like out of left field, just boom. She has me removed by security because she thinks I'm going to stay there at the hospital with my own mom and her mom in order to not be homeless for a night. I was like, no, it's just Christmas. So the biggest regret I have of that day was they gave me a card that had $50 in it, and I took the $50, and as I'm being escorted out by security for no fucking reason, I took the card and I threw it in the hallway as I'm walking out. I regret that so much. But I ended up at a warming shelter that night, and a highlight of it is that a guy has a seizure there at the warming shelter, and nobody knows what the hell to do. And so I stepped up, and I did what had to be done, and actually helped save his life because he was asphyxiating too. And I did this in front of the director of Arches. So now I'm his hero. He tells the story all the time. I'm like, it was nothing. I walked away from it, washed my hands, got a cigarette and a cup of coffee. Like it was an everyday thing. But he put me into the ATRAP program, which is it's like the homeless vulnerability self-sufficiency program. And I get to be in this pilot program to help those who are homeless, addicted, or homeless due to mental illness or anything, go into a program that helps take care of them. It's like a really good system. But anyway, so I wasn't ready. My daughter had gotten taken away by DHS due to my choices. I'm just now on the uphill battle to get her back because I finally made my choice that I wanted to be clean on my own. And waited a long, grueling time until that happened, until I was ready, and I had to hit rock bottom, and I did, and I almost died from cellulitis, that like green line of death. But to wrap this up, I'm in Bridgeway recovery now. I'm at 85 days clean. I've never felt so sure of myself and so like I can really rely on myself, and so out of love with drugs that I have no fear. I just hope I can continue it either way. I just got a call today from the Arches program, and they are putting in for a 1-unit bedroom for me to transition to a 2-bedroom unit and get my daughter back. And I was writing it till the end with Bridgeway. They're like, "You've got to leave, dude. Like, we're done with you. We can't really say you're." So it all happens, on the days that we least expect it. But I'm one of those people that's good at pulling it at the last minute. Either way. I learned, just do you and lead by example. And that's my motto now. I don't have to rely on anyone to keep me sober except myself. And everything from then is support. And I do make sure I choose my support wisely. That's all I got. I'm Josh, and I'm a grateful recovering addict.